Welcome to Rights and Remedies, the podcast where we explore the law, the fight for justice, and healing. I'm Allison Mahoney, your host and a lawyer dedicated to fighting for the rights of survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, as well as children harmed by the child welfare system. Each week, we delve into legal battles and court cases, share powerful stories that demand change, and spotlight the cutting-edge practices that are helping victims on their journey to healing. So, if you're ready to dive into the intersection of advocacy and healing, subscribe to Rights and Remedies today. New episodes are released weekly, and we can't wait to have you join the conversation. Together, we can make a difference. Welcome back to Rights and Remedies. Before we begin today's episode, please be advised that we'll be discussing sensitive topics, including domestic violence and abuse, which may be triggering for some listeners. If you need to take a break or skip this episode, please do so and prioritize your well-being. Today's guest, I'm excited to announce, is Darla Radilla. She's a trauma-informed coach and the founder of High Value Woman. Welcome, Darla.
Thank you. Hi. I'm so thankful to be here.
Yeah, I'm grateful to have you and to hear about what you do for your career and what your business is all about. So I think that would be a good place to start. Can you explain to the audience what it is that you do?
So I am a certified trauma-informed coach. And so what that means, and I also specialize in somatics as well. And I help people to be aware of their body sensations and connect those to past experiences through coaching sessions in a period. We do a lot of questioning and finding the answers within themselves.
I see. And what does it mean to be a trauma-informed coach? How is that different from other types of coaches?
What I found in my own experiences, and cognitive behavioral therapy has its place for sure, and I've done a lot of it. But when I started to talk and rehash all of the other everything that's happened to me from day one, you start with a new therapist. Tell me about your childhood. That re-traumatized me, to be honest, and especially when I had to go to multiple therapists to find that right fit. And so the difference between what I do and them is with trauma informed is we try to be really aware of what we say and we do and how that can further traumatize a victim. And one of those things is rehashing everything. So we just focus on one thing at a time that shows up in that moment.
Okay, and that makes sense. I have a law firm and we're trauma informed. And what you're saying is exactly what we try to do with new clients. We have them write a narrative, and the goal of that is so that we don't have to ask them to repeat what happened over and over and over again. And can you shed some light for those who don't know, why is it traumatizing for people to have to explain what happened multiple times?
In the beginning, it can certainly be therapeutic. When we are saying it over and over again multiple times, we're reliving it basically in our mind. And
Mhm.
sometimes we don't necessarily need to do that. It's also just kind of reinstilling it in that memory. It's kind of like when you break up with someone, you've got stuff in your house that reminds you of them. Every time you see it, you feel that pain of, "Ooh, I miss that person." It's the same concept, a little bit more, trauma is a little bit more, it's worse, but
Yeah.
it's the same concept.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And in terms of areas that you specialize in, when we spoke, you had mentioned domestic violence. Is that an area that you specialize in, and are there any others?
Narcissistic abuse specifically is what I specialize in, but domestic violence certainly fits into that
Okay.
because narcissistic abuse has a lot of different forms.
I see. And I do want to ask you more about narcissistic abuse. Just to back up, how did you get into this line of work? What drew you to it?
I have lived experience with narcissistic abuse. Unfortunately, I've had several relationships with men that were narcissist, and it was a really difficult road because I have found that how I got into this business was that a lot of licensed therapists don't have that lived experience, and so they really don't understand it. Like if I were to try to counsel someone with addiction, substance abuse issues, I can try to help them, but I really don't understand the whole psyche of how that happened to them.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing. And there's some therapists that were fantastic and a lot that really weren't. And I got frustrated because I wasn't getting the support I needed. So I decided to go get some certifications and provide, kind of combine that lived experience with some
Mhm.
book smarts.
That's incredible. Really incredible. Turning something that you found challenging and painful and difficult on the road to healing, and you decided to go and find a solution and help others were experiencing the same thing. So I give you a lot of credit for doing that. In terms of certifications, what types of certifications did you have to get to do this work, and how long ago did you start your company?
So I started in February on my certifications. I have completed one. It's with the School of Positive Psychology in England, and it is in somatic trauma informed coaching. I'm actually working on that second level, which is a master's equivalent, and that I have till February to complete.
Okay.
I am going to be in the future as well getting a certification in narcissistic abuse and codependency. I'm
Mm.
also, those are on the radar for next year. What was your other part of your
Oh, and
question?
how long ago you started your company?
That's it. So it was April, actually.
Okay.
I just decided to walk away from employment and just jump. And I'm really glad I did. I
Yeah.
really don't see how I could have done it all while I was working.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. And at least for me, that initial jump is kind of scary. It's like, oh my God, what did I do? But then everything starts to fall into place. And
Yeah.
it's really amazing when you realize that you can build something and stand on your own 2 feet and help a lot of other people in the process. I hope you get to travel to England as part of your program. No, not yet.
The option. I've been to England and I love it. So, I do have the option that they do have sometimes like a Christmas ball or something.
Mhm.
But oh yeah, traveling is definitely in the plans, just in general.
So, going back to narcissistic abuse, can you explain what that is?
Yes. So it actually is something that can be hard to spot at times. And when I say that someone is a narcissist, that word gets thrown around a lot. So if
Mhm.
someone is mean, is a jerk, selfish, that doesn't necessarily mean they are a narcissist. I'm more looking at people who have a pattern of lack of accountability, of taking advantage of people, being very manipulative, and that is hard to spot.
Yeah.
They do things. The like probably the most common thing that a narcissist will do is that love bomb, devalue, discard, where they to completely shower you with attention. They come on really strong, move the relationship really fast. They're the white knight, and
Hmm.
then once you're in love with them, hooked, they'll start to kind of devalue you a little bit, give you less attention, maybe make a snide remark, then it goes to the cycle of discard. And that rarely means that the relationship is over. It means that they're going to ignore you for a while, whether that's silent treatment or they disappear, don't answer question or texts, calls, and
Hmm.
then they start the cycle over.
And is this something that narcissists are doing purposefully, or is it just something that they don't even realize they're doing?
I think it's on purpose.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of them are incredibly intelligent. They're very smart. They're very good at what they do. They are definitely very observant. My ex-husband, I was married to someone else at the time when I met him, and he picked up on the fact that I was being neglected. I was unhappy and didn't know it. But he honed right in on that and did everything that my ex-husband wasn't doing.
Uh, Interesting. Very interesting. And that period or that pattern of love bombing, devaluing, ignoring, and then all of a sudden paying attention to someone again gets the other person or the victim hooked, right?
Yeah.
So how do you even begin to break free from that type of situation?
Tough. And my situation, the first one, I had been in it for 10 years and we were married. And I had also been financially abused. I didn't have a job. I'd given him all my savings. I had not a penny to my name, literally. But I think first of all is figuring out if you need to leave. If you feel like something's wrong, usually it is. And I say go to a support group or talk to a counselor. Sometimes friends can pick up on it, sometimes not, because they're usually very different people behind closed doors than they are in the public realm.
Yeah.
But if I would say just go with your gut.
Hmm.
Really go with your gut. and don't tell them. That's the biggest thing. For me, I just had to have a lot of faith. When I left, I didn't have a job, and I just had to decide that even if I were on the streets, it was better than where I was.
Oh,
I
thank you.
wasn't,
Thank
but
yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that, of your personal experience. And I think what you said about trusting your gut, that's such a huge, huge thing for people who have been abused in any fashion. They lose the ability to trust in their judgment and decisions because of that pattern of abuse. So it's a huge, huge part of it. In terms of the types of clients that you work with, can you explain who your ideal client is and how people how they're finding you right now?
my ideal client's going to be a woman. And it may not necessarily be someone who says, yeah, I definitely have been abused by a narcissist because I didn't know it myself for a very long time. It's someone who says, you know what, I'm really overwhelmed. I'm anxious. Something's wrong in my life or I'm unhappy in my life. And I need to talk to someone about that. Because trauma is also something that I work with, not just narcissistic abuse.
Okay. And do people realize that they're in a relationship with someone who's narcissistic or who is traumatizing them in some way, or does it take time for them to realize that?
Really takes time. I know it did with me. I didn't know till a year after I left. And when a counselor pointed it out to me, I thought she was crazy. I was like, no, but I love him. I mean, I was so what they call trauma bonded. I also had what they call Stockholm syndrome, which is I was sympathizing with my abuser because their manipulation is so good. They basically, I say it's a cult that they brainwash you to believe the way you believe.
Hmm. And for those who don't know, what is trauma bonding?
Trauma bonding is when they get you hooked. Kind of, I describe it as like when you give a child a piece of candy and they're enjoying it, and then you snatch it away, and then the child starts to cry and wants it back. So trauma bonding is kind of like that. So in that love bombing
Ah,
stage, when they're so perfect, they never ever go back to that ever. So when you get hooked, you want that more than anything, and you will do anything to get it back. So you basically lose your mind. You're not crazy. You act crazy, but you aren't.
that is fascinating. I love that comparison too. I've never heard someone describe it that way, but it absolutely makes sense. And so
Mhm.
love bombing is only something that happens once. It doesn't happen again in the relationship. It happens at the very beginning, you're saying, as a way to hook someone.
Does happen again, but it never happens quite as strongly. That first love bomb phase is always going to be the best one.
Huh.
But it's kind of like that breadcrumbing thing too. Like they never come back in that full version that they were originally. They're going to come back a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller because you're willing to take less.
Hmm. Hmm. And so, what services do you offer your clients, and where do you offer them? When I say where, I don't mean the address of your office, but in one state, all over the world.
So I have several different services. I have a free support group for women that is specifically for narcissistic abuse. I do one-on-one appointments as well, and that is internationally. Everything is on Zoom, so I can see people from all over the world. No geographic restrictions at all, which is great. And my website, where all of my links are, and where you can book an appointment or join that group, is highvaluewoman.info.
Okay. And I love that you're offering a free support group to survivors as well. What does the support group look like?
It's on meetup.com, and it's a weekly meeting. I usually have a topic that I talk on for like 10 minutes, whether that's the love bombing or we just talked about how you get isolated in a narcissistic relationship. So I talk for about 10 minutes, and then I open the floor up for the rest of the hour to the ladies. They either talk amongst themselves or I, interject. I just kind of let them share whether it's about the topic or if they just have something that's just they really just need to talk about what's going on in their life. I just let them say whatever they need to say.
And is the process of voicing what's happening and getting whatever it is off their chest, is that one step in the healing journey? Yeah.
It is. I think talking about it is so helpful. And I think what's even more important is there are some women that have parents that are narcissists. I don't have that experience. I just have relationships. And what is wonderful is when you're in a group of people that have the same experiences, they get you. And a lot of times they offer better advice than I do because they understand what it's like to have a mom that's a narcissist. I don't.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. Okay. Incredible. You had also mentioned somatics. What is somatics?
Yes. So somatics is how our body actually stores and releases trauma. So when we have something that happens to us that stresses us out, not only is it recorded in our brain, it's also recorded physically in our body. And even if that memory goes away or it's not there, until we actually sit with it, that discomfort and release it, it will remain in our body for the rest of our lives. So I help people just to be really in touch with when they're talking about something that upsets them, what that body sensation is.
Hmm.
And then, okay, when did you feel like that before?
I see. Okay. And I'm just thinking to times when I've been upset about something, it's I'm not paying attention to where it is in my body. Is that something that's common for people that they don't even know something's being stored in a certain place in their body?
Absolutely. I've asked women before, what are you feeling? And they're like, I don't feel anything
Mm,
because we haven't been taught to be in tune with that.
yeah. And so what does the process look like when you're working with someone and you ask them, okay, where are you feeling it in your body? How do they release it?
They're going to almost always go back to a childhood experience. Gosh, when I was a little kid, it connected to this. And I'm going to just start asking questions. It's different every time. I never know how it's going to go, but I'll just start basically on what kind of. So, an example for myself that I use a lot is over the summer, I had some car trouble when I was camping up in the mountains and my transmission went out. And I was 3 hours from my house, had to leave my car in Tucson for a couple of weeks.
Oh my
And
God.
so, yeah, it was hairy.
This-
But halfway through this process, I get really upset because they don't know what's wrong with the car still. They don't know if it's going to be covered by warranty. And I'm like, what is taking so long? And of course, in the middle of the night, I wake up intensely upset, and my chest is tight, and I'm kind of like panting and breathing shallow, and I'm angry, and I'm trying to settle myself down. Like I can't do anything about it. The dealership's closed, but I'm having these, oh, I'm a woman, they're taking advantage of me thoughts.
Yeah.
But as I tried to calm myself down, I thought, okay, what is it I'm really upset about? Yeah, I'm mad about the car, but what is really driving the intense emotion about this? And because I kind of do this on myself sometimes, I started to think about it and I realized that I had an incident when I was 4 where I was very afraid of my father, and my mom well, she did force me to hug him and I didn't feel heard. And I was having those same body sensations.
Huh.
I didn't feel heard. And so sitting in that, inquiring about it, and then kind of having that realization and saying, okay, I'm going to just let this go. I
Hmm.
get it. I release that emotion. That's kind of the process.
Okay. And then does it come back? Is it something that has to be released multiple times, or is it like
Sometimes.
a one and done?
I think it really depends on the situation and the person, but yes, sometimes. In
Okay.
fact, if you have intense trauma, there's a lot of different layers of that and ways that it is. And I think the most important thing is just sitting in the discomfort. And I pretty much just hold space for that. I sit with them. For my personal self, I found if I sit in it for about 10 or 15 minutes, it'll dissipate on its own. This is something I discovered even before the course. But yeah, it's always
Yeah.
good to have a hand
As
holder virtually.
as someone who's done quite a bit of therapy over the years, one thing I've learned is that we are taught to, or kind of conditioned to, avoid those negative feelings and emotions, and sitting in it and being able to
Mhm.
sit in it is
Yeah.
so important. So I understand what you're saying there. In terms of of trauma or feelings when we're feeling activated being rooted in childhood experiences. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Is it always rooted in childhood experiences, or could it be that someone experienced something as an adult that was really traumatizing and that's where further emotional activation stems from?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the time it's childhood, but that's not always the case. It can be. Maybe you had a bad relationship and you got burned really bad. I've got both of that going on because I have the childhood and then I have that 10-year marriage. But yeah, absolutely. It can certainly be something else.
And do people realize that there's an issue stemming from their childhood, or does it take a while to get to that point of realization?
Takes a while. While I've always been aware that I had a pretty messed up childhood, I don't think I realized and still don't, quite frankly, because I'm still working on healing. I always will be. That I didn't realize just how much and how it drove my decisions and why I was going after emotionally available, unavailable men. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think we realize the full extent of it until we actually start to dig into it.
Hmm. If we could pivot back to narcissists, I'm curious about attributes of narcissists since you've studied this. Can you talk about what they are and if there's any red flags for people that they should be aware of?
So they are often very charming, often very good looking, well revered in the community. They're very much about image and charm, so they stay under the radar, but they're good at explaining their behavior in a logical way. That love bomb, devalue, discard, I think is really one of their main tactics.
Mhm.
If you find yourself compromising boundaries or not having boundaries, that's a big red flag too, because they kind of dig at that. Um, and I think it really mostly goes back to the gut because
Mhm.
in all three of them, particularly the first, I really had this feeling like, why is he so chummy with his ex-wife? Why he says I'm paranoid and I'm overreacting. They have
Yeah.
kids together. But wait a minute. What's going on here? I just don't feel good about what's going on over there.
Mhm.
Or why would he be willing to steal me from his quote unquote friend and I'm still married? Like,
Yeah.
why? You know,
Have you read The Gift of Fear by
no.
Gavin DeBecker? He talks a lot about that, like those little feelings that we have along the way, and how especially women will override them or disregard them or try and explain it away, like, oh no, I'm being crazy, and then end up in a dangerous situation. And when they look back on it and really break down what happened moment to moment, there were little signs that their body was picking up on, that maybe, just if you were a normal person just looking at it, you would think nothing of. But, one of the things he says is that we know, like our body knows if something isn't right.
That that is so true because I knew. I just felt it even before I was aware of the whole somatics. Your gut and I normally feel it in my stomach. That's usually where I feel it.
Huh. Are all narcissists the same, or is there a spectrum? Are there some narcissists that are less dangerous than others?
Yes, so there's definitely a spectrum, and they are all over the place. So you could have someone who's just mildly narcissistic, or you could have someone who is malignant or a psychopath. I would dare to say that all psychopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are psychopaths. They are definitely on all different scales. And it's interesting, I've had three, and it seems like they went down on the spectrum each time. So I don't know if that's an improvement or not, but I don't know. But the first one, definitely very dangerous. He stalked me. And so I
Oh
left the state I was in and felt physically unsafe with him for sure.
my gosh. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
Same. Me too.
Well, I'm happy that you're free of that situation.
Me too.
And could you talk about who they target and how, if you know, how they pick who to target?
They often target very strong, successful women. And there's a couple of reasons for that. They're kind of like a vampire, and they have this delusion that, oh, you have a quality I don't have. I can kind of take it out of you and put it in me. So it's a very weird thing.
Hmm.
But even more so, and particularly the more higher they are on the spectrum, they actually enjoy breaking you down. My ex-husband, I was had a
That's
very I was financially stable, confident, good career, and I know that he enjoyed watching me become a shell of myself in 10 years.
oh, that's so heartbreaking. That's really, really heartbreaking. Can I ask, during that time, did the people who were close to you notice a difference in you and what was happening to you?
Don't really think so. I did have one friend come back to me and say, "Hey, I don't like the way he talked to you."
Yeah.
I think it's because it's so subtle. It's not dramatic. I call it the drip effect, like on a
Mhm.
rock. So you have the river and it's eroding a rock, and you don't really see it in real time. But if you go back to that river in 10 years, that rock will be gone or severely or much smaller.
Yeah.
And narcissistic abuse is the same way. It's like one little piece at a time, and it's so gradual. This is why you don't notice it. So people are like, oh, wow, she's put on a little weight, or she looks a little tired, she's quieter. But there's no, because everything looks rosy on the outside.
So you got out of that relationship, and I mean, 10 years is a long time to be enduring that, but I'd imagine that there's some people who don't get out of it. If the person who is being abused is becoming a smaller and smaller version of themselves, does there come a point in time where the narcissist is no longer, I don't know if entertained, but is the right word, but like getting anything out of it and moves on to someone else?
I think on some level they're still entertained, but the one thing that they do with everyone is it's what's called supply. So when they're with you, they're not just with you. You're just one person in a harem of women, and they are while they're with you, almost always they are with other women. And they are going back and forth with whoever is the easiest target. So you may lose some of your allure, but there is some satisfaction in that they still control you.
That is very scary. Very,
Yeah.
very scary. I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways, there's many takeaways from this conversation, but is trust your gut. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, pay attention to it because you know. Um, and then I think the last thing I want to ask you about is, so when I think about narcissistic abuse and the type of abuse that you're talking about, it makes me think of psychological abuse. Is that what this is? Is a type of psychological abuse?
It's definitely, I would say primarily it's psychological abuse. Um, and that's where that brainwashing comes in. But it can take many forms. There are violent ones. Thank God, there's been some physical abuse, but I wouldn't really say that I had like I was beat up every day. Not, and I'm not diminishing it because actually psychological abuse in some ways is tougher because people don't believe you. You don't have bruises to show them. There's financial abuse, which is what happened to me. They also isolate you. There's sexual abuse. I mean, there's any type of abuse you can think of. They will use that against you.
Ugh. Well, you are doing incredibly important work, and I think you're going to help a lot of people. Um, in closing, what message would you give to someone who is currently in a relationship with a narcissist and is starting to realize that something is not right?
I would say definitely go with your gut. This is not going to be easy because I'm sure you still love this person very much. And there is that bonding that's going on. But support yourself. Really start noticing. Be much more aware of when you're feeling uncomfortable and keep that in mind. As you know, I highly recommend you get out. My ladies, I will support them either way. But I say get out because the longer you're in, the more damage they're going to do, and then the harder it's going to be to get out. And, you know, confide in a friend you trust. Maybe find a local shelter if it's that serious.
Mhm.
And I will say, if you do leave, just be really careful because most of the homicides happen in the first 7 days, and not all of them are going to be that crazy, but it's abundance of caution is never, inappropriate. Just be really careful. Um, Definitely have some sort of support that if you need somewhere to go, take care of yourself, be kind.
Thank you so, so much. I know you mentioned your website before, but can you mention it again, where listeners can find you, how they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, sure. So that's highvaluewoman.info. I also have a podcast myself, so it's called You Have the Power. So you're welcome to give that a listen as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Darla. Thank you for your work and for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Rights and Remedies. I hope today's episode gave you valuable insights into the legal issues facing victims and the pathways to healing. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Whether you're a survivor, an advocate, or someone looking to learn more, we're here to support and empower you. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. You can also follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at ALM Law LLC for updates, resources, and more. Until next time, take care and remember that together we can make a difference.